Peace. Can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear me? Islam. Peace. Everybody can hear me, right? I'd be asking because sometimes this thing be going in and out, so I don't want to make sure everybody can hear. So please type it in if so. Islam? Okay, great. Great. Hope everybody's well. Anybody got any questions about anything before we get started? Peace, everybody. Thank you guys for the participation. Peace. Brother Dan said, can you explain Ghislaine Maxwell's Terramar citizenship? Yes. Terramar was a part of a project that was initiated by the backers of Epstein to create a sustainable ecosystem by which the progeny of rich billionaire so-called aristocrat class would be able to crossbreed their DNA and then marry each children's to each other to then create a populace that they would then take those and then put them into a different area to be raised as if this area that these children are raised in is like a utopia, and the rest, because the rest of the world had been destroyed. This was funded under something called the Butterfly Trust that was initiated with money that came again from Epstein backers like Wexner and and the Maxwell, and as well as members of the Israeli High Command and them type of people. And so Terramar was the justification that they could create because they were following the blueprint left to them by L. Ron Hubbard, who discovered after going through tax situations with the United States that although he was a part of the system, he was still under the yoke. So he decided to take his people and make them naval people, i.e., putting all of the people under the admiralty law of the science of the Church of Scientology, which is then protected by the Constitution in terms of the freedom of religion, as well as protected under the Pseudo Registration Act, Religious Freedom and Restoration Act, which then protected them, which they then could use to then finance this. So all of the money that this nigga was getting, he was funneling into these projects, which is why they had to have sex with so many children, because the children were also used for genetic harvesting to eventually create chimeras and other things that they can then use. And then once they were used up, those children were then either put back into the system or they were chosen for elevation, which means they would go into other MK programs, like program Dark Forest, program there's another one he was doing, a heavy one. MK Naomi. When all of the stuff that you see with Sexy Red and all that stuff is MK Naomi stuff. It was MK Ultra and it was MK Naomi. So MK Naomi was dealing with all of the black people. Naomi was or is a acronym for Negroes are only momentary individuals. So under MK Naomi is how they started using a lot of mind control program on black people through different music and different radical associations that could be linked to drugs that they can then use to compromise other people into getting other people into drugs. And so people like Jimi Hendrix and these types of people, they were usually the ones tapped for that, because he already had deep spiritual roots, being that he was to Salagi, you know what I mean? And so that's how they did it. So that's why they had to have the submarine licenses, because what they're not telling you is that the reason why these yachts cost so much money and stuff like that is because a lot of these yachts convert into submarines. And then those submarines can go into the underground cities and the underground bases and stuff that the millionaires, all frequent, which all fall under the laws then of whatever the cult, the ultimate cult that is running that facility is under. But even then, whoever you are, you're still under the admiralty because it's all Poseidon. So really the god of all of that stuff in the water is Poseidon, which is Neptune, who gave up his physical vessel to then go into to come into the earth and rule for a certain amount of time. And then once that was done, it could no longer go back to its heavenly station. And thus you see the dead version of it circling around us. That's why Neptune rules Pisces. You understand? At one time, before the flood, two fish in Pisces swam the same way. After the flood, they started swimming in opposite directions because it now became about polarity instead of multiplicity. Yeah, the Tamar language is a version of Yiddish, and because they're all Jews, these are all those people. You understand what I'm saying? So they are all just really white people or Khazarian Jews that are just creating their own sub society because this is what is in their religion, which is what we're going to discuss. So I want to play something real quick, right? And have you listen to it. This is the realest. Yeah, we're going to get into that, the timing and all of that, but this is the realest to me explanation or closest explanations to what I've been talking about in terms of how these things work and how they work people, and then how those people are then used as vehicles, but how they basically created for themselves. So listen to this dude, and then we're going to go into that. Big up to him because he was really on point with this. All right, let me set it up. All right.
I'm a proponent, rather, of what's called unified field theory, which is all of the paranormal, at least the darker side, it kind of tapers to one source. What I am suggesting, and the evidence backs this, it's pattern confirming over and over again, is that usually what we're seeing are balls of light at first. And then the ball of light will project something, a physiological construct that we will believe is an actual entity. And what we've done, right, is we've bought into that, the diversification of the phenomenon to the point now where we're, okay, no, it's not this, it's this, right? And so it's got 1,000 different aliases, even the alien. And all we're saying, and others that I'm working with, is that, okay, it's the same pathology. Even the gifting field, it's the same. In biblical antiquity, it's exactly what the idolaters were doing. That's where all of this technology originated. Remember when I told you about how the phenomenon will tether itself to an object and material? That's where the gifting field originated, right? An idolater stoking the embers of a dying fire called out to the darkness, I want you to do something. Well, okay, what am I going to do? I want you to perform head magic. I don't even know what that is. I do. It's okay. I want you to go into this location. Where's that at? I'll lead you. Drops it out. Materialize it into this dimension. Now here's where the implant came from. Remember what I told you? It's just recontextualizing in ufology. The implant came from idolatry, where the practitioner goes out again to an undisclosed location. The phenomenon says, go and pick up that piece of metal and carve the name of an unclean spirit into it. And I will merge my memory into that meta material. It's not enough. It has to be inside of someone. So I want you to go and get a cadaver, and I want you to implant me into that body. They placed it underneath the tongue. It's the same thing in Egyptology. And what would happen was somehow the metamaterial would activate the consciousness of the phenomenon. And now that cadaver has a host. She is the host. They have to host the entity. And now the practitioner is conversing with the deceased body, and the phenomenon has implanted its consciousness into someone. That's the implantation of the phenomenon. And so the two main pathologies I've understood in my research is that the phenomenon replicates by implantation and impregnation. And both of those are happening at the same time.
So you see what I'm saying? So y'all heard what this person is saying, right? So you see what I was saying? How these things did not, or manifested, or manifestedly did not actually exist in the space that we understand existence to exist to be, and that eventually these things just became to be and were shaped into what beings and what people wanted to perceive them as, to be able to empower them now, right, with this false information to then move in on everybody else. So the thing on your right allegedly was something that was seen in the clouds, and they ran it through an AI detector, and it was like, nah, that's not, it's not AI. So you understand? So there's that. Then what you're seeing here next to that is um, a picture. This is a picture of Yahweh and its wife. Now, they don't talk to you about Yahweh and his wife because the female energy is constricted in that movement, right? And within that constriction, they have to use the woman without really telling you they're dealing with her. So, like I told you, when they're at the so-called Wailing Wall and they're doing that dance where they're going back and forth, that's them physically having sex with the non-physical Shekinah or Hakma, right? Which is the divine feminine aspect of Ashira, who is the god, right? Who is the goddess or consort goddess to Yahweh, right? But you don't hear that because to then speak of Asherah would then mean that Yahweh, again, is not the ultimate, right? The way that they're purporting it to be. Now, me personally, I'm not saying it is or it isn't because it's not my perspective to always inject like how I perceive it. What I'm striving to get you to understand it based on what we just heard from Homie, right? And the overall taxing element that comes from uplifting a deity, right? That creates the symbiotic relationship that leads to the eventual inhabitation or so-called incantation that comes from dealing with somebody who is an idolater. Now, you and I believe that idolatry is such like you just get a idol, like you make something out of wood or stone and you put it up and you start worshiping it and all of that. That is the latent form of it. The idolatry that these people are talking about is when you uplift anything outside of the highest virtue of yourself, or give up that most innocent or potent part of yourself to receive something materially. You understand? Thus, Yahweh and Asherah, or this entity that we're seeing manifesting out of the clouds, or whatever it is or isn't, is just another representation of all of these things that have plagued humanity from, or I don't even want to use that because human means monster on the literal sense. On the metaphysical sense, it means one who's made of light, but that's another story. But either way, we're dealing at a time now where all of this is now coming out. We have punctured and beat these people around the world into submission so much that they now have to try to train the AI not to understand or try to act like it don't know what all of this stuff is about the Moors and the Moorish history of America and the so-called ancient Aboriginals, who again are the ancient Phoenician, Canaanite, Moabite, Hittite, Amorite, who eventually became American Indians, who eventually got misnomered as this, whatever you want to call them. These Moors, who have been here from the time immemorial to now, have now created such a fervor that it is now a known thing where people who are not even Moors, people who have not even really they are now just waking up like, oh, this is the stuff that they've been talking about. Whereas 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we would not know. Or when I was talking on stuff, you know what I mean, we was going in on it. They was debating us on the smallest minutia of the idea. And now that it's going to be, in a sense, a cemented nationality in the consciousness of the original people again, it is now opening up the doors by precedent, all of the other things that represent itself. So what this means is that the very spirit of the liberty and everything that was created out of the dysfunction and stuff that came at the fall now is actually rise to the top, to the point where this nigga put out an executive order the other day that says the Smithsonian has to give up all of the documents, the records, the files, the bones, the gold, or whatever they got. He said in the entire structure, in all of their structures, and the tunnels, all that shit got to get cleared out. That's the stuff that's dealing with the giants, the mound builders, the ancient Moors. They said back in the days after the fall, after the so-called rash of fires, right, which was the destruction of our governments and stuff here on the land, that when they would go and reclaim the land to refound this palace now as a post office or a bank, they had the tribal records of everybody just strewn all over the shit. They had the files, the records, the gold, because it was all done. We was all gone. So what were we supposed to do? What's up, Jake? How was it?
Good.
Good? You ate well?
Yeah.
You had a good day? That's what I'm talking about. I love you too, man. Yeah, see? That's what I'm talking about, man. It's all about them. Anyway, these niggas got all of that stuff messed up. Why? Because they gave up their heavenly stations to then get into the daughters of men. And from those daughters came the daughters of the American Revolution, the Dars. And then from those Dars came everything else where they can now start to rule after the war started. Remember, the Prophet started the temple in 1913, and then the next year, 1914, the World War breaks out. But the World War had been going on since 492, since I-492. You know what I'm saying? In phases. So the grand phase, the grand first World War for us was I-492 to 900. To I-900, 913, right? That's the first phase. Then the second intermediary phase is, let's say, 20 years after that, you get to the real heavy lynching, the real heavy assault on all of us that was already here, right? This is when they start doing the exposition fairs and all of that, and started to create delegates. Like when you ever went to a World's Fair or a fair or any type of thing, and they had a delegate for the fair. Like you don't have fair delegates, you have fair goers. You know what I'm saying? You have the city people, the people from the city set up, but you don't have delegates from there. You send delegates when you're dealing with something else. Yes, the Roaring Twenties, because this was the time they could go in and do all of the stuff that they was doing. Because the first phase of it started when they let all of them slaves out in Ellis Island, from Ellis Island, and then that was it. Because from 1871, from 1812 to 1871, 1865, the first phase. Then the next phase, 1865, 1871. Then 1871 to 1914. That's the height of their stuff. So they tell you that the whole thing started because they shot the Archduke Ferdinand in the head. So why, if somebody got shot in the head in Austria, right? What the hell what that got to do with us? It don't. That was just something that they used to bring everybody in, to get money, to destroy everything so they could do the mass death ritual, because they had already did it with us. So the first phase of the war was wiping us out, turning us into prisoners of war, erasing the history, claiming the deeds, claiming the land, getting us to get into the false doctrine, accepting vampirism, accepting their version of Christianity, which made us dead to ourselves, which then gave us the right to exist under their version of God, which is the devil. Right? which then made us all citizens under these things, because these are the things that they're serving. You understand? So when they say God, this is the stuff that they're serving. This is who they believe that they're enchanting. But remember what we just heard, what homie was saying. Whether it's an alien or a demon, these are the same things. You understand? Crowley conjured lamb in the 30s, in the 20s, the 30s, whenever it was, right? Then by the 50s, you start seeing gray aliens that look exactly like lamb. But what is lamb? Just another version of Yakub, right? Which allegedly none of these things exist, which we know they do exist because they've got CIA reports on it. And the CIA, again, just like Mossad, just like the Saudi Secret Service, just like all these niggas, they are the arm, right, of the black, what they call the Black Awakening. This is these niggas. They are serving that because they are trying to recorrect or resurrect the old paradigm, but not the paradigm you think or I think. The paradigm in which that these things lived again and could live, you know what I mean, without the fear of being wiped out. That's what the whole cycle is about. You understand? So the cycle is about being able to live bad and get good results. That's what they want you. That's what they want to do. Understand? So they're creating the pathway for them to do that because their cycle of time is up. It's over. You understand? So homie knows that. He was put in position to do that. York put this nigga on the picture on one of the covers of the tablets years ago. I think it was Leviathan 666. He had him on the cover of that. Blonde hair, blue eyes, everything. However, the end of one cycle is the beginning of another. And that's what we have to understand. We getting caught up in the forest for the trees. We think that they karma is our karma. And that's because they bred into you to believe that. But now the time has been come where we can cleave ourselves away from that. Look what's happening in Burkina Faso. These niggas was spending over $64 million a year just on wigs imported so that way they could look like white people in parliament, in a parliament. So Terraria said, you know what? We're not doing that. We saving that money, putting that to farms and gold and other shit. We're going to wear our own regalia when we in our court. And look what the regalia is. Now look at your boy in the middle. Look, he wearing the regalia of them. Now, while this is happening, there's a nigga in London who, while King Charles was in court, giving his thing, he stepped up in the House of Lords and spoke out, challenging the monarchy as the rightful heir, being that he's descended from the royal house of Wessex and Essex and Wessington. Wessington then ties it to the Huguenots, which again is the Moors, the southern French Moors that wound up moving to Virginia and helping establish the so-called Constitution of the United States of America, right? So this nigga is presiding over the reconstructional era of the situation in which the two have to be cleaved from one another, meaning that there'll be a technocracy for niggas to go into with no souls and all of that they're going to try to enforce, but it can only be enforced on the people that have been chosen to be artificial. You understand? They have to give you the choice. That's why they've been doing it. That's why they keep prepping you for the aliens getting here, which I'm gonna play one of that in a little while too. But anyway, so this is what's going on. So see this right here, the cycle. See the cycle of us carrying the white man on the back? That's over now. This done passed, right? So now we're in the cycle where we're standing up on ourselves. See how he got the Hebrew? See, whenever you see them with the white or the red band around their head, like a headband, that's showing us the original Hebrew. But the original Hebrews, again, is a combination of the of the Chaldees, right? Who were the ancient Magi, right? Who were the ancient Moors or the ancient high priests of Anu, and a people that used to be called the Midianites, whom by which they say Musa married the daughter of the Shechem, the chief. So this nigga whose name is Christ. So I'm saying all that to say that all of this stuff that you think is Jew and Hebrew and stuff, the Hebrew, all that stuff is Phoenician. All that stuff is ancient so-called Canaanite. And when we say Canaanite, we're really saying That's just the English corruption of it. You know what I'm saying? It's not even that, but that's what we're referring to it as. And the Moors, Moors on Stump of America, Moors period, we know in terms of the descendant ones, we were the descendant from the ones who was caught up in the splendor and the destruction, right? So we are the last ones that held it and saw it all rise and fall, rise and fall, rise and fall, to the point that we wound up falling into it. This is what it says in the Circle 7 when it talks about, and they fell from their noble natures and fell into the stations of men and just became lower, and then were involved in more materialistic, militaristic forms of government to be able to control the life forms and the golems that all these other dirty Moors and these other things was creating to expand their power over the ones that they couldn't, which was the rest of us. You understand? So he's playing a part. He's the grand one. He is the one who is playing the mace. He is doing the Masonic ritual in real time for with the whole world as a participant in the ritual. That's what you see him as. That's why he's so important to them. You know what I mean? That's why he come in two colors, the red hair and the blonde hair. He's the wild card. He is the free radical. Free radicals are those things that are quarks and quantum fissures that exist at a point right outside of perception. And they're doing all of these wild, crazy things to help things explode into reality. But as soon as you turn your head to see them, they stop moving. So the white man has been trying to create a machine that allows him to look at these things without them seeing that it's looking at them. This is how deep this nigga is trying to figure out how creation and how to get around the karma that it's manifested by allowing itself to be a golem, to be a homunculus for this agenda by these ancient peoples who didn't understand after the first time they got washed away and now about to get burnt out the whole earth as well. You understand? That's what we're dealing with. These niggas have been waging the same war against that. So Yahweh and Asherah might as well be Nimrod and Semiramis. You understand? Because when we go back to the whole war on heaven, war against God, it go back to Nimrod, who basically was Sagittarius, right? And because he was half man, half beast, he was a demigod, as they say. So he was a creation, a hybrid creation, right? If we're taking this personage as a real entity at the time that we're talking about, he was manifested out of illicit union between that which was non-human, non-human intelligence, which may have been a manifestation of the intelligence of the humans that were striving to manifest it based on the power of belief. Because remember, back then I told you a lot of people were more bicambrial, meaning that they had it wasn't so much electronic noise and shit like that could separate you from your average thoughts, from your perceptions. So you were more active. That part of the brain was more susceptible to how the world was and how spirits and those things actually worked and were still in tune to, because you were also in places that were in ruins. These machines, these stones, these tablets, these artifices, right? They're still working. It's just the people that forgot how to use them. So they trying to piece together how to do it. And if you go back to every major society, there was always a ruler who was obsessed with the old knowledge. Go back and look at any old movie. The villain is always the nigga obsessed with the old knowledge, trying to get it to build the machine or to free the demon or to find the treasure, right? This we think this is an aspect of human life. This at one point this was a daily aspect of human life. You understand? This is your everyday life. This is this stuff you're dealing with. You thinking about. Logic is not necessarily, and reason is not necessarily what it's about. It's about you understanding and sifting through belief to get knowledge, because it's all under Poseidon. It's all his age. It's all under Neptune. It's all in the water. That's why all of the stories, there was always people coming out the water, right? And the families assembled, consisting of about 600,000 men. And they went to seek the extensive piece of ground to build the city and the tower. And they sought in the whole earth. See? And they sought in the whole earth. The whole earth. So what the white people want you to believe is that they just mean the earth at that time, which they saying is over there. But remember, there's a Mesopotamia in Belize over here, right? There's a Babylon over here. There's an Egypt over here. There's all of the stuff that they keep telling me is over there, is over here. And everybody over there keep trying to come here. But if that's the Holy Land, what the hell you worried about what we doing over here with? That's how you know. Look, the whole earth, and they found none like one valley at the east of the land of Shinar. About 2 days' walk, they journeyed there, and they dwelt there, and they began to make bricks and burn fires to build the city and the tower that they imagined to complete. And the building of the tower was unto them a transgression and a sin, meaning that they worked day and night, because sin also means moon. It means lunar period. It also means Sino, or the Sinai, who are the ancient land dwellers of the Shinar, who they also refer as the Scythians or the Scythians, who themselves, again, were all melanated people who eventually developed into another group of people they refer to as the Tartarians and these types of people. You understand? Don't change the fact that they're melanated. And I only say this because if we don't, then they're going to continue to do what they was doing to us when they were saying that the Moors wasn't melanated. Remember them errors? That went on literally from the time Jeff Fort and them, peace to Chief Malik and them, went to jail. From then to like 3 years ago, they were still trying to be on some acting like what we were saying was crazy and all this other shit. Or keep trying to create little, put up little puppets to go through situations to make you think Moors is only about traffic tickets and not paying taxes and all this other bullshit, right? Once the identity is declared, once it's been announced and put on record, they can say whatever. But the burden of proof is on them, and they can't prove it because they are always in the wrong jurisdiction, because they put themselves outside of that by accepting the titles of nobility that were against the amendment that allowed them into the union in the first place. Right? Not the original union, the Confederacy, which is us. No, this was them. So right here, again, I'm showing you how this has been going down. So all around the earth they had to go, which means that we was all over the planet. But it happened to be in Shinar, which they now call Greater Tartary, right? Which at one point occupied parts of America, right? Okay, that's one. Then we get to this one. Okay. Now I'm using a biblical text also because this is what most people base aspects of history on. And we will talk about the flood, post-flood, and pre-flood, post-flood. You know, I could use aspects of the Uber Pishtim and the Epics of Gilgamesh and all of that, but for the most part, people that's just getting into that, they can't get into all of that. Look, we're barely getting them to grasp the understanding that what they place their faith belief in becomes a golem, and that golem becomes a homunculus. That homunculus, whether they're female, can become a succubus, or a male can become incubus. You see what I'm saying? And then from there, you are now fully possessed. Remember, he said it comes from two ways: implantation and impregnation. All of them times you heard about people in the alien, what the aliens doing to them, they're probing them, they sticking things in their behind, they trying to deal with their reproductive organs because they was let loose. All of these things was let loose to do their thing, because this was the time that they was able to do it. And their judges and rulers went to the daughters of men and took their wives by force. Remember, I told you in Europa they created the prima nocta, where the nobles was trying to breed out the Scottish nobility. So whenever a noble got married, a British noble had to come and have sex with that nigga's wife the night of the ritual, because if he didn't, he would be also breaking his Masonic oath. So he would be breaking his fealty to his king, right? Which it wasn't his king. So when that didn't work, they said, well, you would be breaking your Masonic oath as one of the Yorks. So a lot of these bitch ass niggas went along with that. So this is what they're talking about. And these niggas that's doing that is possessed by demons, because the crown is being possessed now by these occultists, right? Who are a part of the Societas Draconis that we wound up, that solidifies itself by the 600s, the I-600. From the force of their husbands according to their choice. And their sons of men in those days took from the cattle of the earth, the beasts of the field, and the fowls of the air, and taught the mixture of animals of one species with another, in order therewith to provoke the Lord. And God saw the whole earth, and it was corrupt, for all flesh had been corrupted, its ways on the earth, all men and animals. And after this, they sinned against the beasts and birds and all that moved and walked in the earth. And much blood was shed on the earth, and every imagination desired men. This is in the book of Jubilee. So this, again, is what we're dealing with now. This is the Jacobean process. This is the grafting. This is all of the bullshit. This is all of the twinning, the mind control, the MK Ultra, the waterboarding, the electric shocking. This is what all this shit is. The psyops. This is all part of the ritual that is a part of their religion. Therefore, they cannot be held according to the actual laws, right? They can't be held necessarily accountable, because then you would be going against their religion. And that's how they always get you. You understand? The Zionists and the Nazis are the same thing. I could show you a coin that they got where they got the Nazi symbol on one side and the flag of Israel on the other. They made a deal. The Havar Agreement. This is facts. And both of them came over here and created a fourth column, a fifth column within the so-called deteriorating Freemasonic society, because they was going broke. People was not going into Freemasonry. People was living good. People wasn't trying to do none of that. Niggas had Cadillacs. Niggas had their own stuff. And this is after segregation. They had to slow all of that down. They had to stop us from producing, manufacturing. That's the first thing. So they shut down Detroit, shut down the cars, shut down all of that. Americans make the best cars in the world to this day. That's why you see Mustangs in Japan. That's why you see Mustangs and Chargers and shit in cold ass Russia. But they want you to drive a Tesla. You understand? It's what they've been doing, man. Read Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. Progressives hate Ayn Rand. They don't want you to read shit like Atlas Shrugged, because it's exact. They don't want you to listen to people like that. You want to listen to a white bitch? Listen to somebody like that. She sober you up real quick. And they would, so much so she was so anti-communist, they would try to flip her shit into sounding communist. That's how crazy they were. But remember, communism, all that stuff was funded by the same people that funded Rothschild and them, same people. And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass that as they journeyed from the east, they had found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. That's why they could go all over the world. What did they say about the Moorish Empire? They said the Moorish Empire was so thin, at one point, all of humanity was basically speaking the same language. Remember, up until the 1700s, Babylon was Egypt. Egypt was known as Babylon. Egypt had a sultan, and he was called the Sultan of Babylon. You understand what I'm saying? This is just in the late 1800s this was happening. So they playing in our face. And so one said, boom. So they said, boom. And they came down to the city, to the tower, which the children of the men builded. And the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand another's speech. Put a pin in that. Remember that. Because what did they intend to do? What was they trying to build a tower to do? Anybody remember going to Bible school and they told you this shit? What was the intention? What was they trying to do to build the tower? What was the ultimate goal? Okay, they build it, then what they gonna do? To reach God, right? To reach God, but to reach God and do what? Yeah, to do what though? To go to heaven, right? Okay, without dying. So that's, they were trying to cheat immortality. Cool, that's one thing. To be higher than God? No. What were they trying to do? What was Nimrod's purpose? Cause remember, he getting visions that he gonna get washed away. The giants in them towards the end was going to Enoch like, yo, we want you to beseech Allah to God on our behalf to not wash us away because we having these dreams. Because they didn't have souls and nothing. So they couldn't have intuition, premonition. They only had instinct and evil. But they knew fear. This is the first time they knew fear. And the fear was coming from they couldn't understand what was happening to them on a spiritual level because they were not made to be spiritual. Put a pin in that. Remember that. They were not made to be spiritual. They were just made to see if they could overcome what was already made, right? Was already created, who was us. Already been here, manifesting as it, right? So boom, watch this. They did it because they wanted to wage war against him. These are people who are so-called giants, Nephilim inflicted, Rephaim, all of these types in it. Well, not Rephaim. Rephaim came after the so-called flood. But these are the people of the day, and they are such massive megalithic builders that they believe that their goal. Now, in the Talmud, it says that their goal was to reach heaven and imagine war against them. They wanted to war on God, kill God, put their gods on God's throne, and then worship that God. Isn't that exactly what we just heard that nigga say in the opening? This is their goal. Their goal is, that's why they keep trying to break the so-called firmament or make you believe that the firmament don't exist or this or that don't exist. It's easier to convince you that it doesn't exist more so than to convince you that it existed or exists still, but in a form that you do not have a reference for. But your forefathers did, and your forefathers created a manifestation way for you to chart and even bind and control these intelligencies. That's why our ancestors, again, were the ones that had to be corrupted. They were the fallen angels. They were the ones who fell by getting into bullshit. They had control over the Ophium. They had control over Poseidon and all of them. That's why we could navigate everything. That's why everybody was speaking the same language at one point. Morality wasn't a thing. Good and evil, the way we perceive it today, was not a thing like that. At one point on this earth, every living thing was totally corrupted and evil. Do you understand what I'm saying? You don't. Like, I don't think we can perceive it. But what I'm trying to express to you is that the cataclysm was to such a degree that we are still debating on whether or not the cataclysm even happened. But we, as a collective species, know that it did. It's just a question on how long and who it happened to the longest. That's where we get messed up. Why? Because they created time differentials. They created time portals to divert the initial timeline that, had not this happened, we would have still been on. That's why they were successful in 1492, because people like us, it was us falling to us, fighting against us, creating things, impugning and dealing with these entities like this this Ophium right here. That's what the armillary was based on. We created this because we were able to map the spiritual DNA structure of the Ophium and was able to corroborate that into a structure. They took this structure and created what we today call the globe. But that's not what we use this for. That's why it's called an armillary. The millinery, right? The haberdashery, that's where the Moors would meet. Because that's where they would put get their hats and their feathers and everything made. Arm for the arm that uses and circumscribes the earth. This is the oldest clock. Look at what it's based on. It's based on the same thing. It's based on how the world really looks. They just put a globe in here now to fool you. But the very first globe on earth was created in 1492. Now you tell me. Now, these are the same people that tell you that Newton discovered gravity, that this person discovered gravity. But we have all of these Moorish scholars, from Maimonides to Ali Jabra, to all of these different high priests, basically. And they know this, but they still will tell you some nigga in Europe created it, knowing that this nigga in Europe got all of this from where they all got it from. Because at the time he got it, there was no Europe. Yeah, the bad guys in that is the small hats. Look at how they look in dark crystal. So whether it be the Intergravicissimus, whether it be the which instituted the Gregorian calendar. Why the Gregorian calendar? Oh, it's named after Gregory. No, Gregory is named after the Gregory. The Gregory are who in the occult world? Who are they? See how it always go back to some shit that's not physical, that's not real, but niggas is dealing with it as if it is, and we are now, you and I are now forced to deal with it as a reality, when really it's a fiction. It's fake, man. They're intuning these entities, opening these portals, trying to get to these parallel aspects of the same place. So what is also happening, that they've done this so much, right, that you have a whole contingency of them, right, from the other side of wherever it is they're working on, because the universe is simultaneous. It's all happening at once. Okay, it's all happening at once. So on this side, they are striving to open the portal, right, with their CERN. On the other side, there's a version of them that is also working on the same CERN thing to open it up. So when they are opening, right, into this mirrored dimension. They're just opening up into a mirrored version of themselves. So do you see the paradox? They're trapped. They can't do nothing. These things that they're dealing with can't even help them because it is them. It's them. They're going to themselves for help. Do you see why they're insane? Do you see the problem what I'm saying? This is why it was destined to fail from the beginning. That these niggas lost as soon as they started the first ritual. Soon as the first thought of sacrificing the first baby, that's where the whole shit went off the rails. That's when whoever had that thought should have been stoned to death or whatever it was, and it should have been done with. But once they decided that this is what they was going to do, and these Grigori, who were who? Who were the Grigori? Oh, that's Pope Gregory, but no, it's not. Pope Gregory probably didn't even exist. That's what I'm trying to tell you. These niggas reset the whole thing in I-582. They redid it, then slaughtered and tried to kill everybody that remembered all over the world as a continuation of the ancient war between the ancients and the moderns, which was a war between the pagans and the non-pagans, the idolaters and the non-idolaters. That's the war. That's what's going on. Who's an idolater? You want to find an idolater? Watch this. When you say anything, talk to somebody in the street about Cardi B. As soon as you say something about the moral context of what this person is, not to say that Cardi B needs to be moral. It is what it is. It belongs to the game, not the name, first of all. And it was created in iniquity and sin. So it's always going to be what it is. So stop expecting it to be that. Just because Kamala Harris and them niggas dragged this thing out to try to convince you to vote for them doesn't mean that it was a good move. Doesn't mean that this person is smarter than a bag of hammers. It's not even about her. It's just about what she represents and what she's used for. So as a daughter of the American Revolution, as a harlot of Babylon, right? As one of the premier witches in the thing, when you speak to somebody and somebody say, well, she got money, she could do this and that, that's an idol worshiper. That's how you know. That's how easy it is to spot them. Soon as somebody say, oh, well, they got money, boom, idol worshiper. Yes, the Gregories are the watchers, the perpetual watchers, right? The dirty voyeurs that watch so much that they got so caught up and so jealous that we had our own type of physicality and lordship over dominion, everything. They had to come and make their own version of it, despite the one that allegedly made them. These are just higher versions of ourselves. And then they birthed a whole chimera version of these things. And then they wanted to compile all those things, create gods out of those things, and then use those things to build on this machine that they will go past the firmament, past the holy heavens, and into that, kill the one that created everything, right? Then place these false gods on that, and then they get to rule and do everything. That's the ultimate goal of the Zionists. When they talked about the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, that was propaganda. That was created by the Theosophic Society. People keep talking about the protocols of the learned elders. You got to go back to the Theosophic Society, which was all Jewish Kabbalists. The Jewish Kabbalists trace their lineage, their Freemasonry, all the way back. That's why they say that they're the lords of Freemasonry, because they can trace their lineage back to the dreaded halls and dungeons and the hanging gardens of Babylon. And while they was in Babylon, back then, they was our color, okay? And in our color, when those Hebrews who had already grew up idolaters under Egypt, who decided they were going to be monotheistic by accepting Yahweh or whatever, right? Who went against that after they got their money and all of that. They went back to worshiping their old gods, right? Asherah and Baal and Mithra and Molech and all these things, right? All of these are hybridized creations of other dark magi's, dark people who were trying to create those things to be able to upset the kingdoms that were at the time that they could then rule and then bring about the real gods that they want to bring about onto the earth. That most likely were just manifestations out of their mind. How did they become real? Oh, the same way they do it today. A nigga in a lab is like, yo, what would it be like to if you had a bear and a tiger, but you gave them some reptilian DNA so they had scales? What would that be like? And then go and use the gene sequencing shit and all that to actually create that. The problem is when you create things like that, they cannot reproduce. So what do you have to do? You have to find something from the actual population to bring in to find ways to manifest something out of that. That's another form of time manipulation. Where did they learn this shit from? They learned this from these outsourced intelligences. What did the nigga say in the beginning we was listening to? He said they manifest as orbs, right? How many times you used to take cameras with them Polaroid cameras and you would have so many orbs in the camera, it'd be like, it looked like it was snowing. Why do you think they started phasing them cameras out? Right now, you got a Tesla, go to the graveyard, sit in front of the graveyard and watch how many people you see walking around that's not there on your camera and all of that. Because these niggas opened up shit and didn't close it. These people, it's all idolatry, bro. Well, what's the difference between idolatry and ancestral worship? There isn't. You're not supposed to worship your ancestors. You're not supposed to worship them. You're supposed to ask them for wisdom. And that wisdom comes through the blood. But if you got to cut up a chicken, you got to cut a cow, you got to cut a human being, you're not receiving wisdom from the entity that you think you're doing it from. Because when you do that, you are entering into the contract of the idolater class that do that. So that's like you ringing a bell. You done rung a bell, and now everybody that's down with that shit know that you're there. They all see you now. Now you got to keep it going. You locked in now. You ain't know. Somebody should have told you. So Jack Parsons, remember NASA was created to hide the true and living God, right? Which is the highest aspect of self that we collectively are the manifestations of. That's how you know that these things are a lower manifestation, because the true and living don't got time to deal with nothing. It don't ask for nothing. It don't do nothing. You don't even see it unless you look deep within self. Supposedly, Crowley's portal was further enlarged by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory founder, rocket fuel scientist Jack Parsons, and the Scientology and the Dianetics founder L. Ron Hubbard on March 46 at the location later became known as Area 51. Their experiment was called the Babylon working. Like the Alamantra working, it was based on the ceremonial sex magic, because they found that the only way they could commune with these things was to give them blood through some sort of satanic situation. So even though they don't believe in that shit, they will do it. That's why in the late 60s into 70s, after the LSD movement, the Department of the Army initiated Project, what was it called? It was called Project. Well, they had the Project Jedi, right, where they made the movie The Men Who Stare at Goats, because they were all Templars who were Baphomet worshippers who were trying to use the George Lucas thing, which was really a veil for the old Egyptian Jed temple order of Anu that was teaching people how to transcend the sacrum, go into the sacrum, and in that go into the throne of the Father, the heart of the Father. Anyway, all that being said, this nigga, he basically did it, and he died. They blew him up in the ritual. Yeah, Yoda is a manifestation of that Freemason, one of those Freemasonic entities. one of those machine elves. Like when people who do DMT, they said that the machine elves come out. Yoda is a machine, is like a machine elf. A lot of the old practitioners like John D and these niggas who were into that version of Enochian manifestation. He said he manifested him like that. What's his name said he manifested him too, but that's Crowley. So you got to take it with a book of grain of salt. But this nigga Parsons is who they base Iron Man on. And Parsons, they also say, was actually Howard Hughes. They said when Parsons died or whatever, that was one of his aliases, or that's one of the altars that he went into, and he became Howard Hughes. Either way, Parsons was the one who opened the portal with that chick, and they manifested to Harlot. And then everything started going crazy from that point on. That's when the United States as a country really started going insane, because all the occult shit got turned up. That's when the Bohemian Grove shit started. That's when the satanic ritual abuse became known on TV. That's when they started letting you know. That's when Twilight Zone, all that type of stuff started coming out. It also happened, this was also 1946. This was also the year that they created the welfare system to start roping black women up into that. This was also the year that they started to assemble what became in the Supreme Court document known as the Union of the United States. This is when it finally got outed. Okay. It was outed in something called the business plot. Okay. The business plot was when they all got discussed, when they all got outed by a nigga named Smedley. Smedley was a loyalist though, but they thought they could flip him. So I'll show you. And of course, it was the members of those people. All the decadence I'm really seeing, I used to think it was an exaggeration, but when you really go back and start really researching all this stuff, it really goes all back to these people. It's crazy. They're always involved, like always. Any type of crime, any type of rape, murder, human trafficking, blood sacrifice, they're always involved. That's crazy. That's crazy, yo. It's not always you see black people involved with it. And I mean, at the very, very top, you're dealing with the black reptilians and these types of niggas, but I'm talking about always. So that's crazy. So yeah, right here. The business plot was also called the Wall Street Push, right? Or the White House Pushed, was a political conspiracy. When? 1933. In the United States to overthrow the government of President Franklin D. Roosevelt to install Smedley Butler. See? They were going to put the Butler in as the fake dictator. Butler, a retired Marine Corps. See, that's what they didn't know. Marines are fiercely loyal to the Republic. All real Marines, at least. Like Air Force, you might could flip them. Intelligence, you could definitely flip them niggas. Navy, maybe. SEALs, no. Regular Navy, I don't know. But most Marines, nah. Them type of niggas, they'll kill you for trying to even approach them with that shit, like a real Marine. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, yeah, so they was gonna get Smedley in as a retired military corps or major general, testified under oath that the wealthy businessmen were plotting to create a fascist veterans organization with him as the leader and to use it as a coup d'etat to overthrow Roosevelt. In 1934, Butler testified under oath before the United States. Boom, with McCormick in them. It is a gigantic. Then the Times, which was owned by these niggas, right? See, billionaires buy U.S. from millionaires. See, right? And I say it's the Onion like it's a joke and stuff, but it's true. This is what happened. They ruled the gun. How else could Rockefeller take control of the educational system? How else could Rothschild take control of a whole country just with these people? And we know that they did all of this, and nobody seems to do anything about what happened as the result of that. None of them have gone to jail. None of them have been punished. None of them have done that, which means what? It happened because what happened was the coup d'etat was successful. Remember, Roosevelt was the socialist welfare president. So he was the one with the talented 10th. These are the black sellout niggas. Booker T, Washington, all them niggas. These are the niggas playing both sides of the fence, right? He sucker get the talented 10th to come in and act as the buffers to create the divine nine that would always protect the so-called Boule white families. Because really the real truth of it is the real Boule families are the white ones. The white families are the Boule families. The black families that protect those Boule families are really the parent families. You have to understand when the black codes and all of the stuff that was against so-called black people, that was for the people today you would call white. That's why the laws were so harsh against them. Because the white people, who were the melanated people, were creating laws to stop these newly genetically created people from coming amongst them. And because they were labeled black under the Transportation Act, right? They fell into that. So the only way out for the Reconstructionists was to tie the skin color to the status, and through forced education and war, make everybody forget how it really was. This is clearly laid out in the book, The Forgotten Cause of the Civil War. It's clear. The free white persons were the rich European nobles and those who were ennobled or indentured, who were melanated indentured, who could then come over and eventually purchase their freedom because they were not slaves, aka they were not born of slaves, born of Slovenian DNA that had been genetically manipulated by these human incubator niggas that had been doing this all the way back from the beginning of the first Grand War in I-492, and even before that, now going all the way back to the flood, to stop creating mutants. Whenever you hear niggas say something on TV say scientists have just discovered a way to make orcas, dance with legs and stuff like that, these are the people. This is them. Who are the scientists that are doing this? Who are doing this and why? Why are we sanctioning them to do all of this crossbreeding shit? Why? Because if they can get you to do it to the lower species, you'll eventually break your resolve and they can do it to you. The whole goal of all of this is to lower the age of consent so that way they can start to openly manipulate, castrate, eat, rape children in front of people like they was doing in the old days. You could just take a child off the street, rape it in Babylon during the high holy months. That's why they'll always talk about themselves being in bondage, right? But they never go into what they was doing in Babylon, because in Babylon, that's when they started creating all of the hybridization. That's when they started learning all of the Anunnaki shit, all the Yakub shit. That's when they start really getting into it and realizing that they could take over the world by manipulating genetics, by turning people against each other, by creating alternate forms of humanity that don't exist. And then because these things have such a malevolent nature that they have to be fed with blood, this then gives them the ability now to bring about that. Every religion on earth has some sort of blood sacrifice in it, except more science. Think about it. How many people died? How many people died with them Arabs pushing Muslims, pushing that whole thing? How many people died under Christianity? How many people died under these things? Billions. How many people sacrificed? Billions. Billion. You never even know. What was the empire on earth in the modern era trying to keep all this shit going? Who was doing it? Them. So in Babylon, that's when they learned about all of that, all of this stuff I'm telling you about. So by the time they got free and was able to bounce, now they was on it. They was like, what? We're going to make this happen. And thus they did. And they took everything out, you know. And then because they was now speaking different languages, they would just call their god, this one god, Nimrod, this nigga. So Nimrod becomes Zeus. You know what I'm saying? Like these become different versions of the same dude because it's the same people who are involved with it. Carbon dating is fake. You know why? Because it doesn't take in the magnetic sphere of the earth. It doesn't take in the polarity. It doesn't take in anything but what they say because it's fake. They created, like I said, a false time period and then put us in it involuntarily. And then separated the times from that by the time between the I and the J. By the time the J was created, that's when they started creating everything else. That's why the 6 is shaped like a J. And both in the 6 and the J is shaped like a 9. And both of those are shaped like a fish. Because the 9 is the trickster. The highest number is really the 8. The 9, whenever you bring 9s into it, it brings you right back. Because 9 perpetuates itself. That's why they are called the divine 9. Because they're perpetuating themselves. Their society. Their gods. And what gods are they? Esther. Minerva. See what I'm saying? Zeus. Apollo. When these niggas is talking to you about, oh, the beast, the dude, the Antichrist, he gonna come from Saudi Arabia. He gonna come from the European Union. He gonna come from, it's gonna be Trump. It's gonna be, look, according to their book that they are working on, they standing by this book. Right? So whether you believe it or not is irrelevant. These niggas is working it like they believe it. So let's say that. According to their book, none of that's true. They say that the beast come from the bottomless pit. That's it. That's it. So whoever it is coming out of the bottomless pit. The devil that they keep telling you, Satan and this, that don't exist like that. Satan is one thing. The devil is something else. Lucifer is something else. Satan is Hallel. And according to the Judeo-Christian Hasidim, they believe that he is God because he is fighting against the oppression of God. So he is the advisor. Satan, the name Satan in their language also means advisor. It means adversary, but also means advisor. So that's their God that they're working with, right? So that's Hallel. That's why the Muslims, when they slaughter their stuff, what do they say? They say it's Hallel, right? And they slaughter their animals, right? This is why you can have these Arabs selling pork and shit, selling you pork sandwiches and stuff in the deli, right? Because they're not following the one that you understand that they following. They following something else. They following their old Allah deity, the demon. That's who they dealing with, right? Because that's how they were raised. You understand? For every god, there is a goddess. There has to be a consort because all gods were created through sex, through some sort of sex ritual. Whether it was them taking the sex of one entity and putting it into another, and then the next thing you know, boom, you got a falcon-headed thing that knows all of the secrets of the universe. Let's worship it. But those things can live for thousands of years, but they can't live forever. They're not immortal. And when they die, what happened to them? They gone. They out of here. But they can't go to no heaven. They can't go to no hell. They can't go to no higher dimension, whatever. So what happened? They get stuck. They stuck here. So they become malevolent entities. They become bad ideas. They become negative emotions. So in that regard, the Scientologists got it right with the whole Xenu shit they be on. But remember, Scientologists merged itself with the Nation of Islam. So now you have the Nation of Islam and Scientology. Nation of Islam and the Church of Scientology. Think about that. You understand? But they ain't going to get into that. So don't. Just know that there's another entity now at play. So you got Allah over there, you got Zeno over there, you got Zenu over there, you got Allah over there, right? You got Yaqub over there. It's a mess. It's a mess. But they get their funding through H.L. Hunt's Ketchup and the rest of them. So they good. They ain't got to worry about what they got to do for the people and all of that. So they good. And that's the reality in the world, in the realm that they exist in. So unless you're in the realm of the NOI and the Church of Scientology, you know aspects of it as being, whatever, but you're not deep in it. And even those deep in it don't understand that at the very, very top is all of these niggas a part of the death cult working together to use your kinetic energy to feed these things that used to be physical deities, physical entities that were now gone. Look, this was the female goddess of El. Because remember, before Yahweh, they was worshiping Eleon, right? Where we get the term alien from, or Aline from, or Elaine from, right? I mean, at this point, does it matter if he's a clone or not? You know what I mean? I assume all of them been swapped out at some point or the other, in my opinion, but that's just me. But, you know what I'm saying? This is what they do. So again, when I say that when we die, we become gods to these people, why do you think they was ingesting us? Why do you think they was eating us, drinking our blood, having barbecues at picnics, cutting our fingers off? All of this happened within those 20 years right after 1914. Heavy in America. Heavy, heavy, heavy. Why? Because we had lost the war. Amnesia-wise, we had already been in the trick bag for over 150 years from that point, where they could impose the fake history on all of us. But all of this is the proof that we was there. We was already there. Look at the crescent and the moon. See? This before Islam. This in Nubia. You understand? So Ishtar, Isis. So Ishtar becomes Isis. Isis becomes Diana. Diana becomes Athena. Athena becomes Britannia. Britannia becomes... You see? It just keeps going. And because people are speaking the different languages. So once they could be building energy up for a whole mass ritual to do something in that language, then what happens? The high priest die. Somebody forget the words. So this is why they keep losing. So basically, Allah let these niggas get right to the point where it looked like they was going to do it. And he was like, you know what? Just tell them niggas something different. And boom, it's a wrap. And then they shut down, go right back to the beginning. He said, I ain't even going to waste the water this time. I ain't even going to waste the water yet. I'm going to just do this. And just stop these niggas from being able to understand one another. But what happened after that? That led to a lot of wars, a lot of misunderstandings. Because now niggas can't speak. Now you got to learn different languages. See what I'm saying? When it says in Esdras, right? It says in Esdras 15:29, right? It says, where the nations of the dragons, right? Where the nations of the dragons of Arabia shall come out of with many chariots, and with the multitude of them shall be carried as the wind upon the earth, that all they hear with them may fear and tremble. This is before the religion of Islam was even created. What we understand is the religion of Islam was created. Islam or Islamism, the actual right, which takes us all the way back now to the Anu and all of that, that was always there. You know what I'm saying? But it's also interesting that the year of the dragon was also the year 1913 that the prophet set up the temple. And what did the prophet say he was there to do? Why did he set up the Most High Temple of America, divine and national will? Why did he do that? Why did he say he do that? Why? To do what? To do what? Come on, y'all. Why did he do it? To uplift fallen humanity. And what? And what? What's the second part of that? To redeem them from their wicked ways. Yes, for us to know ourselves, but to redeem them from their wicked ways. For what? Why? Because they fell from their noble natures, because they followed the pale gods of Europe. Pale, meaning they paled in comparison. There was nothing compared to what they was dealing with, what we actually had, and what these niggas decided to give up for spite. Because they wanted to rule. They wanted to do that. So they took what was already there. The priesthood. Remember, who set up the whole thing? Who set up this whole thing and all that? I tell you, Muhammad did, right? But he didn't write or write. He didn't know how to do none of that. So they said that the angel Jibril was on the scene. So you see, right? Always a non-physical entity, always a non-human intelligence. And because of that, people give it credence, give it credence, right? So, oh, well, God came to him, so it must be real. Like, what? What? Think of what? But again, this is what I'm saying. This is how they do it. Make you believe something that's not real, but in tune it to the point that it becomes real. There's a medical condition where a woman can make herself believe she's pregnant enough to the point that she not only shows the sign, but she gestates something that actually looks like a seed in the belly. It's possible. This happens. It's how powerful the mind is. Because the mind does not know the difference between what is actual real and what isn't. Your soul, your spirit does. Yes, thank you, J-Bay. They strayed after the gods of whom they knew nothing. See? Exactly. That's why Elion, right? Is that under the Chaldeans and the Hebrews and all that, because that's tying them back to the Anu, which is then tying them to Anu, Enlil, and Enki, right? Which is Odin, Thor, and Loki, which is Osiris, Horus, and Set, right? Which is the Emperor, Darth Vader, and Luke Skywalker. You understand this? It might as well be the same thing. So all of these entities, this triad, that's the archetype, that's the orb that will take the form of whatever the believer is trying to intune in it, to know energy that it may not even know. But it will act as if it does, to be able to bring the worst or the best part out of the practitioner. You can't just do magic. Like real people who are really into this practical magic, right? And then there's real magic. Practical magic, that's the stuff you see on TV and all that. Real practitioners of crafts take years to do a ritual. If they really in it, certain people will do a ritual over a span of their life. Some of these niggas make their whole life the ritual, dedicate their life to the ritual. That's why they want hosts for these things that don't ask questions. That's how deep these niggas go with it. These niggas think, oh, I just did a ritual, you know, whatever. I drew the chalk on the ground, said the prayers, whatever, went home, blah, blah, blah. And then something bad happened, all that. No. By the time they came to you with the offer of that, they had already done rituals to intone you to them, nigga. Because what you don't know is that your mother was in the order. What you don't know is your grandfather was in order. What you don't know is that your great-great-grandfather got a signature somewhere where they said that by the third, fourth, fifth generation, you was going to be the one that was going to be given up. So that way the family could come out the poverty that they agreed to go in during their interregnum period, during their humiliation ritual period. That's what happens. Why do you think they'll let somebody like Jay-Z or these people be around them even? Because also their bloodlines are dead. They're inert. They can't produce like that no more because everything they produce is monstrous. So they got to have a backup family that they could use genetically to reinvigorate the bloodline so that way they could move on. Meghan Markle. Why do you think all these niggas keep having these babies with these demons? Because that's their religion. They're a part of the religion. They're a part of the Societas Draconis under the orders and protection of the Prince of Drakenberg. This is the real shit. This is how they do it. Who has their laws, has the laws, the religious laws of who they are enshrined in the EU. Why do you think this nigga trying to get you out the EU? Why do you think the EU done outlawed Christianity? They done outlawed it in UK now. Especially in London, England. Watch. They're going to start burning Christian churches. They're going to start doing all that. Nigeria right now, it's a free-for-all on Christians. Ain't nobody saying nothing. These is melanated people doing this to melanated people. Ain't nobody saying nothing. These niggas talk about Pan-Africanism. These Nigerian, this is happening in Nigeria, and the president of Nigeria worried about what Ibrahim Traore doing. And you want me to be under these niggas? You want me to chill with these niggas? Maybe Ibrahim and anybody fucking with him, but outside of that, all y'all niggas can get the rape. Look, here go. This is Aleph Lam Lam Ha. Remember I told you this nigga Crowley tried to bring forth Lamb, right? Who turned out to be the prototype for the gray, the archetype for the grays. So this is Aleph Lam Lam Ha. Like Allah. This becomes Allah now. Whom they then take from one of the demons they had in the Kaaba. They took them out, got rid of all of them, and exalted that one up above the rest of them. Right? That why do you think the Moors? Why do you think they say the Arabs and then they say the Moors? Because we was not the same. The Arabs was down with the Romans. The Muslims was down with the Romans because Khadijah was a Roman. She was a Jesuit. These niggas was Jesuits, basically. Roman was fallen, so it reorganized the dirty clans and all of that to move on all of what was left of the real ancient clans, like the Midianites and the rest of them I was talking about that was in that area. All of them that was in Yemen and all that, the real Qurayshites, the real ones. Those is the niggas that they bombing now. They still bombing them now on behalf of Saudi Arabia, which is basically Arab Israel. Because they were set up by the same people, the white decoy brutish. So I'm showing you this to show you that all of the Hebrew stuff, all of that come out of Egypt, all of that Egypt Hebrew stuff come out of Mesopotamia, all of that stuff come out from ancient America. All of that stuff is here. That's why they all have all of the biggest temples and all that stuff for all of these niggas here. That's why all of these religions start with bloodletting. That's why everybody was in a religion that whatever is persecuted. That's why you have so many messiahs. That's why Yeshua is like the last one per se, because outside of everybody else's story, his is the most unique because what the ultimate purpose of it was to say that now with this sacrifice, all human sacrifice is dead. Nobody need to do it no more. So what happened after that? Rome and all of that got shut down. Because what was Rome based on? Human sacrifice. Right? Go and read the Clock of Destiny like we said in the other thing. That it was a whole country based on hostile takeover and mystery religions. Because Egypt, Rome, Greece, Babylon, Persia, they all merged into the same thing. And the crown jewel of all of them became the place we today know as Israel. That's the real mystery Babylon. That's them. That's why, because you ask yourself, how could they openly just do this to people and this stuff happen and nobody stopped them? It's a mystery, right? Everybody know who it is, but nobody move on them. Why? It's a mystery because you're in mystery Babylon. Because you don't know. You think you do, but you don't. You don't, because they're all with it. Because you assume that there's some people at the top that are actually cool, that are not down with it. That's why they win. Because you don't get it. They're all down with it. Because they are all a part of the cult. They're either in the Brotherhood of Eagles or the Brotherhood of Death. They're either in the Ibeline or the Guelph. They're either in the Scottish Rite or the York Rite. They're either in the North or the South. They're either the Crips or the Bloods. They're either the Democrats or the Republicans. It's either the United States or China. It's either Ukraine or Israel. You see? You see what I'm showing you? I'm showing you the pattern recognition of a phenomenon that cannot be explained away as just, oh, that's just how people are. Oh, that's just politics. Oh, you can't change City Hall. No. That's the spell. That's the trance. Think about it. If they print money every day, how could they go bankrupt? See, it's a mystery. You don't know, but it's Babylon. You see? You see what I'm telling you? They print money every day. How can they be in a recession? They print money every day. How can they be charging you tax? How can you be late on your taxes? They print money every day. How can there be no money for food, for roads, for infrastructure, for schools, for art programs, for sports for children, for this, for that? No, all of that money goes to them people over there in the gray state, in the prison state. They get all your bread. They get it all first. The interest is going to them because that's part of their religion. You don't get it. We don't get it. It's that simple. They are a part of a religion that gives them the right to dominate the rest of humanity. That's what they believe. And you could show them directly to their face, but their religion has an out to give them a out to lie to you to your face. Because in their religion, they're not lying to a human being. They're lying to Goyim. They're lying to cattle. They're lying to profanes. They're lying to somebody that's not in the fraternity. They're lying to somebody that's not in the cult. They're lying to somebody that's not in the job, that's not under the badge, that's not a part of the bar. That's not, you see what I'm saying? This is what you're dealing with. It started out black, but now it's all colors. And the part of it that karmically that we were a part of, we Moors now, we have disassociated ourselves from that karma. You know why? Because we're the only ones on record that have been saying this from the beginning. Everybody else been capping. Look this up. Head rights in Native American context. For instance, the Osage Nation, for example, allocated head rights as shares of income from their collectively owned mineral estate. Significance. This system made by the Osage members among the wealthiest people per capita in the world at the height of the oil boom, as their head rights were worth millions of dollars each. Evolution head rights were passed down to the legal heirs upon the death of a member, and the Osage Nation government structure evolved to be based on head right holders. The head right was a colonial land grant of land, typically 50 acres, offered to attract settlers to address labor shortages, especially in the Virginia colony, which started in 1617. This is right after the flip up now. So this is this is 2 centuries into the war between the ancients and the moderns. So now everybody trying to flip up land and trying to use the new languages and stuff to say that they different people to acquire other people's land so that way they can be, erect they altars and do all the bullshit they want to do. Landowners could accumulate large areas of states by paying for the passage of new settlers, including indentured servants who were promised land upon their arrival. The system also exists in a different context, such as Native American tribes, where the head right refers to the tribal member's right to a share of income or property derived from the tribal trust funds, as seen with the Osage minerals wealth. Okay, now you and I, we all have head rights because we are all, under the English law, seen as bailiffs of the hundreds. Remember, I told y'all that, right? And we talked about that. The bailiffs of the hundreds are the ones that have the original head rights because they were the ones who either descended from the original people, set up indentures, and then were able to use the indentures to make money, right? 1 second. So after they did this, they created a structure. We had to create a company because this was also happening at the time that everything started flipping. So after the doomsday situation with Cromwell, he had to list everybody's documents, everybody's money, where it all initiated from, and everybody's estate. So that way, anywhere they went in the world, those estates could be tied to the original landowners, right? That's us, right? Now, the company that was set up to do this was called the Morocco Company, because the Morocco Company was the ones who were underwriting the Virginia Company. Why? Because Mr. Paysor, whose real name was Bayshore, was actually the regent or the guardian over the true Dauphin, who had to escape the French Revolution and came over to the states that had already been under acquisition here under the protection of Lord Bayshore, who was this knight or steward or whatever to the King of England, who spirited him out. So the original business that was set up as a shell to be able to have money for him to, so when he came over here, they had to escape here, they'd be cool, was called the Virginia Tobacco Company. Then when it became the colony, it became the Virginia Plymouth Company. Then when they started bringing more bread into it based upon the amount of equity of the shares that they had to give, they started to call it the uh, Virginia Colony Company. Then it became the state of, by the time it became the state of Virginia and all of that got incorporated in. But the original founders, the original shareholders were the people who on one side of the aisle allowed him to come here and set up shop and get money. And on the other side, see what I'm saying? Pay that money back in the form of shares to the people that he sold it to. This is the same thing that happened with the Dutch company. Okay, so now here it goes tied up. Well, first let's see this. Yes. Okay. The Barbary Company, Morocco Company, or Barbary Company was a trading company established by the Sultan of Morocco over here at Fez and all of that, because all of the Moorish dominions over here was started to be kicked out, started to get phased out and repurposed between the end of the 500s into the 600s, and then by the 700s now, right? They had started to become more cosmopolitan. By the 800s, now you had the wars. By the 900s, now you had what you would say is the collapse or the transfer. So then after the 900s, which is to us the 1900s, that's why everything was so hard for us from that point on. You understand? This is the real Sultan Abdul Aziz, not that Arab they show you in the book, regardless. So right here, they telling you where Morocco was. 642, the Empire of Morocco is much the largest of the Barbary states, comprising the ancient Mauritania, that's everything over here, the modern kingdoms of Morocco proper, everything over here and over there, and other divisions. 1643, the country of Morocco is remarkable for fertility, blah, 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 blah. Then when we say here, we see that Morocco represents everything from the Nusus and the Bravo rivers, whatever, right? So we see all of this, right? Now, when the Dutch came to Manhattan, the same deal was made with them. That deal was for a 7% return. So remember, they always tell you, oh, the Indians were stupid, right? Indian was stupid. They bought the land for $23. That's how much it was, if you didn't know. They bought the land, the Dutch, who were melanated Europeans who were into venture capitalism and were fiercely anti-popish and anti-Catholic and anti-Roman. They said better Moorish than Popish. That was their motto. They used to wear little crescents and stars in their little Dutch hats because all of them, the Dutch in them was Moors, right? The Dutch masters and all of that, Moors. The white people you see on the TV shows and all that, Quakers. Okay. So what they did was, when they made that deal, the head of the trust established a head right? The head of the Moors at that time, who were the what you call this? They were part of Lenape, Delaware, Algonquin, right? They make this thing. Now remember, Algonquin is not a people per se. It was the language of the confederated group of peoples who spoke that dialect and were part of that great confederacy. Anything AL is Moorish. Okay. So they purchased the Plymouth purchased Manhattan. At this time, Manhattan is a burial ground. But there's also, at one part of it, at one time, there was a giant, when the giants lived there, they had a giant canopy that went across the whole island, meaning the whole island was like one giant castle. Okay? And the remnants of that is still there. That's in the Smithsonian, and some of the shit they got to get out of there. Anyway, they purchased the head right. The Dutch purchased them with $23. But what they didn't tell us was that that $23 started with a 7% return. You understand? And remember, this $23 back then, this is real money. Okay? This is real money. This is gold and all of that. Okay? This right here is one of the symbols of the peso that was adopted by the Farnese. This is one of the Bayshore symbols on the left. On the right is the red, white, and blue here in America, because the red Georgian clay is where they would get the dye to make the blue, as well as they would get, to make the purple, they would use a certain type of sea creature, sea urchin. So what they did was this, bro. The Nape Trust, which was again underwritten by the Morocco company, it invested into a 7% return. So from that point, from I-623, right? From that $23, 10 years later, that $23 was now $46. 20 years after that, that $46 was now $92. 100 years after that, when we go now to I-723, that was now $23,000. By 1923, when the prophet now is on the scene, he getting the mandate and all that stuff back now. This is all seated under him, because technically he's the only one improper person to receive it, which he did. By 1923, it was now $23 billion. You know how much it is now? You know how much it has reached now in 2023? Just this, just that. You know how much it is now? It's over $23 trillion. Didn't they just tell you that they just was doing an audit and they lost $23 trillion? They didn't know where it went other than. These are the numbers that keep coming up. But the problem is, we're not in our proper person to receive the master titles, because those titles were put under Christian codes. So when we're Christians, we are saying that we have divested ourselves from those original titles, because we have put ourselves under the Iron Cross legions of idolaters. So we have to come out of that to be able to receive the true and living trust. Because now, like I said, this is where, so that's every treaty going all the way back to Granada to now. You have interest, you and I have interest in all of these places. But what has happened is they've made us the sureties, because the dirty, vampiric, draconian, shitty Moors, right, created what was called, what today we would call a Phoenician scheme. It was a movie that just came out a little while ago called The Phoenician Scheme. I don't know if you heard about it. Did you hear about it? Well, in that movie, the main character, right? His name is, let me see. His name is Corda. His name is Corda. His name is Zaza Corda. Right? Let me show you in a second. Yeah, his name is Zaza Corda. And it's basically about, I'm trying to find a synopsis I had, I'm sorry. So basically, it's about how the Phoenicians established all of the dominions and nations in the world, and how they have trusts in all of these nations in the world, and how difficult it was for them to maintain all of these different dominions while they were doing it. So in the movie, he's called Jaja Corda, right? Corda, like Cordoba. The word Cordoba comes from the old Phoenician Cortuba, right? Just like Carthage is Carthadid or Cortadid, right? Or Carthadid. So anytime you see C-A-R-T, a C-O-R-T, that means more. So this is him in the movie. See, he got the white fez on, right? And in the movie, basically, he got all these people and all these different nationalities that's trying to kill him. Now, cord in the movie also mean rope. So he also, this is saying that he's the Lord or the ruler of Europa, the real ruler of Europa. But he wound up having a daughter and wound up having to send the daughter to a monastery. But now that they all trying to kill him in all these different jurisdictions, he got to pass the estate on. He had all these different kids. He got 10, 15 different kids with all these different women, but he don't want to leave none of the estates to them kids because he had to have the kids to be able to hold on to the estates in the land. So instead, he wanted to give it to his daughter, who unfortunately grew up in the nunnery. So meaning she was a Jesuit. So I suggest all Moors go back and watch this movie because it's heavy moral science in it, but it's Wes Anderson, so it can be kind of annoying if you're not into that type of stuff. But this is just, again, another thing. And again, calling it the Phoenician scheme is letting you know that this whole thing started with the Phoenicians. Because the Phoenicians, again, were the original, or the descendants of the original Canaanites and Hittites and all of the other ites that came after us. And the Hebrews were the first ones who crossed them over, who crossed them, stole their identities, and then created an entire new system that they were able to rule their own kingdom for a limited amount of time. But they still needed protection from other kingdoms around them. And when they forfeited those and went against their own God, that's when their own God sent the other idolaters to come and destroy them. Once they got destroyed, they got carried off into slavery into Babylon. And that's where they learned the Talmud. And once they learned the Talmud, they converted that Talmudic knowledge into a digital AI, into a digital AI matrix that, again, they had learned from those Moors that had helped graft them and created the Kabbalah. And then they used the Kabbalah to be able to establish usury stations all over the world, to use that Jewish mysticism and the Chick knowledge and the debt system to be able to enslave everybody to them, to eventually try to break that. So those Moors who saw that coming fought wars against them, created private trusts to protect those resources from them, from these incursions. And so those groups who started again all the way back as the Hereshef, who resurfaced again as the pagan Hebrews, who then resurfaced Canaanites and Hebrews in them. And then there was the split in Moab. And then the Moabites started to go their own way and saw what happened. And then King Shemosh, according to the Moabite stone, shut Hezekiah down, shut him all the way down, took everybody else. And then that line of Moabites went off and eventually became a part of the original covenant and kept it, which is why we was able to maintain our kingdoms for so much longer than them. And then those Jews was cursed to go into all of the different so-called areas. Well, they weren't called Jews then; they were Yahuds. There was no J. So then we wind up collapsing Rome, and then they wind up getting shut down back to the caves for as long as that was. And then at the fall, that's when the dirty ones amongst us, the necromancers and stuff, started creating humiliation rituals, Freemasonic orders to start to give these niggas ways back into modern society. Gave up their stations, gave them decoy names, and then started to fund them while they was doing all of this. pyramids, and then creating the technology to be able to bring these other entities in through the death cults and stuff that they created from that point on. And here we are. That's why it always ends in America. It'll begin here and it's going to end here. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, so the AI is basically a golem, right? Just like the Kabbalah is a golem. The Zohar, that is the interface. The Zohar is the computer that you would use to go into the Kabbalah to be able to canonize the Talmud. And then the political expression of the Talmud, the Zohar, and the Kabbalah is the protocols of the lone elders of Zion and the state of Israel. Yeah, Peter Thiel, all of these people are down with them. So in the end, it don't matter. However, you see what happens with Sky. Like, it's not gonna work. I tell you, they get right to the door when it's gonna happen, and then something happen, and then something stupid happened too. Like, they just forget their language. They just forget how to talk. Didn't you see that in Planet of the Apes? What happened to the people? The apes started getting smarter, and the people started getting stupider. Right? Right? What's that the story? What was they doing? They was building a tower to try to fight and kill God. This is how crazy they are. And what happened at the end of that movie? All them niggas got buried in the avalanche. And who was left? The apes. And all of the shit that they had built to kill us and all of that stuff. Who had free reign with all that stuff now? The apes. Didn't you just see the other day the white lady on TV was singing happy birthday and then went racist and started singing happy birthday and called the little black boy the monkey? Good. Remember that, bitch. Remember. Because the only people these yahoos hate more than us is the white man. They hate white folk. Hate white folk. Hate them. Way more than they hate us. They hate us for different reasons. So yeah, that's the problem. So we got to shut all of these niggas down and create a circumstance by which we can do what we need to do. But that's not going to happen if we following everybody else. But what I'm telling you is that all of the ancient peoples, all of them were melanated. And none of these white folk golden people came out here until what started happening towards the end. This is another scene from the Phoenician scheme. So when you see these white people with these feathers on back in the days, this was supposed to symbolize that they actually was the sons of Moors. So they had the privileges and the rights that the Moors had. That's why you gotta watch the movie. So whenever you saw movies like this and all of that, they would always show the white man like that in them old Casablanca and all them black and white type movies. That's because in all the movies they trying to show you that these is the Moors. These is the white people who living like Moors. That's why he got the white fez on. He got the white fez on because he's the head of, because he's the head of all corporations. And all corporations trying to kill him because he got all his estates and all these different nationalities, but he's not trying to give up his main nationality, which is Phoenician. And all this happens in a fictitious place called Phoenicia, which is really America. So to go over the time thing again, you got the time jump in 582, 581, I-581. Then you got the other one that happened with the king of Germany, when he basically created a lie that said that the Germans were the ones who shut down Rome, because he backdated Rome from the fourth by the Moors in 453 and backdated it to the invasion of the Germans in 576. So whenever you hear somebody say that the Germans were the ones who destroyed Rome, you understand that they under the time flip, because that was the backdate that the fake king did to make it seem like Rome didn't fall to the Moors. That's what all that was for, to save face. So he did that. Then there was another time frame in the 1500s where three European kings get together and they conspire to flip the time differential as well. And they come up with another calendar. And then they war for 100 and the 30-year war was connected to that. So anything Phoenician, more. Anything Egyptian, more. Anything ancient, Chaldaic, more. Because all of them, the ones at the forefront, were part of the high priesthood of Anu. And they were the ones who were fighting against the other priests, who were now creating these fake Freemasonic orders to help bring about the destruction of the people and the fleecing of the people. So again, this eventually got so much that it led to a war between the ancients and the moderns. Also, this is Elion. Elion was not one, they want you to say there was one deity like El, but Elion was the people. Look. Your left, Canaanite. Your right, the Elion. See what I mean? So that's what it's really about, y'all. They trying to really shut it down, but it's almost too late now. You know what I mean? 1 second. I'll play this and then we can get ready to close out. Yeah, peep this real quick.
I'm a proponent, brother, of what's called unified field theory, which is all.
Not this one. This one. No.
31 degrees there. Red showed black people getting.
Wait. It's this one actually, my bad. Believe, yeah. Here we go. Damn it. I thought I had it, y'all. I thought I saved it. This it? I thought I saved it. I'll try to play it next week. But I got one where I taped the dude who was talking about the 7 foot tall so-called original people who landed at the Air Force Base. I was trying to pull that up, but I'll show that next time. Into that next week. Anybody have any other questions before we close out? But yeah, that's what the Phoenician scheme was about. And that's the scheme that they're running today. So when you live in one place, but you have estates in all these different other places, and then you have all these different titles of nobility and stuff like that, that's what led to the ultimate kind of like fall for a lot of us, because it was too many allegiances. A man cannot serve more than one master. So that's how a lot of them got caught up. But make no mistake, we are those people today. And like I said, based on the compound interest, remember, if in 2023, according to the estimates, they owe us, we got 223 trillion just from the Manhattan deal. You know how much money we have from the Grenada deal still? That's still there. You understand? So this is why the money will never run out. It's eternal. This is why they want to create a thing before they have to really give it out. They want to get rid of as many people as possible. So that way only the original people is the ones supposed to be dealing with it. That's why the Africans got to deal with us. That's why they want to set off the Red Dragon, right? Which was initially started with us, because we are the Great Red Dragon, right? With the red flag and the red fez and turban and all that. However, the dragons have dual natures. So we went through the time when we was the most benevolent of all creatures in the world, and then we went to the point we was the lowest and the most opposite. So now we done received and passed all that karma now. So now we are the ones who's going there with it. We are the ones that's supposed to get it. And so what they trying to do is cut us off at the pass before we could even get the blessing. But what they don't know, like I said, or they do know, they've already lost because they wrote themselves in the story that way. And I already told you what they believe. So the Talmans and them people, they believe that they're going to take this war all the way up to the throne of heaven, have orgies in the sacred halls, kill God, and then their false gods will be able to rule. This is how sick and crazy these niggas are. So why would you think they would do anything with you? This is Zeus, a blind owl who carries a galaxy in his eyes, proof that the beauty still shines through the darkness. Exactly. So if this owl, and remember the owl is the symbol of who? Everybody gonna say Molech. No. The symbol of the owl is the symbol of the Moors, who in ancient Kemet were the high priests of Anu. And we see through what all these niggas is doing. That's why they want to throw shit on the owl name and dirt on our name and make us look like we insane and use all these African and other nationality agents to make us look like animals. It don't matter. In the end, it don't matter, y'all. It's already over for them. They've already capitulated, really. We just gotta go through the little seasons so that way it's a wrap. But the head rights is already in effect. So your name is your name for a reason. Your estate is a state for a reason. You are Moor or Moorish American, or accept and declare yourself as a Moorish American or Moor for a reason. And you are the one in this time that was born to redeem what any dirty Moors or any dirty people in your history have done. Same way you done it for whatever people you think you are, whether you Geechee or whatever. You want to say you are African and this cool. But just know when you put African in front of American and you are an American who is not born an African, just know the Africans are going to get all the benefits of being American and you won't. That's just facts. That's just how they set it up because you don't honor your mother, your forefathers, and ancient mothers and forefathers. So they are not. What they're going to do is dress up like you and do rituals against you and mock you and do all of these things in your face because you don't know. You are the gorilla behind the glass that they keep mocking and throwing shit at and acting like it's all good and you always going to be a slave to them and you ain't never going to wake up. You ain't never going to figure it out. You are the one with the amnesia in the story that is now trying to wake up and everybody got a different story as to why you went to sleep. You understand? You are the one they're trying to create false entities and things to exist in that would allow you to have some sort of give up your God-given self to be able to be under them. You are the Phoenician scheme because they base their entire scheme on you and I. Not the Africans, not any of these other niggas. They all help them do this to us. Right? So let's not allow them to know, or let's not let them think that, you know what I mean, we still caught up in the basic shit that they got us thinking is real. Because in the end, they all foreigners. In the end, they all gonna get deported. In the end, they all gonna have to go back where they from. In the end, the Moors are the original Hebrews without having to betray themselves. And the Moors are not the idolaters and the idol worshippers, especially the Moors in America, especially the Moors in Moorish Temple, because we ain't dealing with none of that bullshit. We're not dealing with any of that mystery God Babylon stuff that y'all stay dealing with, because that pale God of Europe is why y'all caught up. So we can give respect to Zoroaster and Buddha and Muhammad and all these other people. However, we are our own people. So we don't have to be anybody else. So you can take a screenshot of these, you know, if you need to or whatever. And trying to think. Next week we'll get into some of the other stuff I was talking about. Remember Virgil Abloh, who they done built a Greek statue of? Well, this is the real Virgil. Enthroned in Rome, Greece, Creeks, right? Holding the Aeneid, right? You see Mauri, more. Yeah, so we were a cosmopolitan people that existed all over the place and had different versions of our name to commemorate the places that we inhabited and ruled. So eventually it has to get back to that. And it starts with getting our head right. You know what I'm saying? So anybody else have any questions? Yeah, so this was the only real, in the middle, this is the only real people who fought against the people on either side. So again, the societies, the Hereshef into the idol worshippers of the ancient world, who were the Hereshef, and then they go into, in the medieval times, as the Persians. They go through a phase where they're Persians, Romans, Greeks, right? Then they eventually settle as Romans. And as Romans, then they wind up merging with the Egyptians. They wind up merging with the Persians. They wind up merging with the Grecians, right? And then they create a whole system called Judeo-Christian. Because now by the 6th century, they invented the J. So now they create in the history to be able to put these false entities into and act like they was there in the ancient world by backdating their existence and by making it like people of the ancient world who were melanated were actually not. And so they had to start to create art and shit to reflect that. And those dirty black reptilian, Venetian, Roman, Persian, Egyptian Moors, Hebrew Moors, Jewish Moors were the ones who did it. Okay? And then they consolidated themselves under societas Draconis in the medieval era. And then by the new era, by the time of the war, they reconciled themselves as European powers. And then after that, starts the World War. And then by the end of it, by the 1900s, that's when they start calling us. They start inflicting the fake history on us. And then by 1933, after it's all revealed about the coup d'etat, they get formally outed as the Union of the United States, which again is the compromise of the old Persian, Roman, Egyptian, Grecian, Venetian bloodlines, the black nobility, the Venetian bloodlines, the Chabad Jews, the private banking cartels, all of the 100 corporations, the intelligence agencies, and then to the Freemasonic societies. That is the enemy. These are the people working to intone and bring these dirty ass, smelly, disgusting entities back into this reality. Because they know with every explosion that happens on Earth, they are actively siphoning all of the residual energy of the organisms that are destroyed in that. That's why the mushroom cloud always takes the form of a brain. You see? Because this is the intelligence that they are breaking or trying to break into. and thus it manifests in the form of intelligence, which is symbolized in our reality by a brain. So I think that's it with this one. Anybody have any questions? If you haven't already, please check out www.aseer.com as well as www.cordobaorganics.com. If anybody hasn't already, please, you can send the $30 to via Cash App to money sign capital DS418.com or same Cash App money sign DV880. And if anybody else needs anything, just hit me up at houseofl@hotmail.com. All right. All right, y'all. Peace.